Hey guys, I'm learning TFT and I'm back with another video where I'm going to break down my research on the early game in 1419. Especially in the beginning of a new patch, it's especially important to figure out how to be strong in the early game and preserve HP in the early and mid game, stage 2 and stage 3, because a lot of times people are still trying to figure out what the optimal late game boards are. It'd be really easy to get dizzy, and the best way that you can climb is to win the early and mid game. So if you can preserve HP, streak in stage 2 and 3, then it doesn't even matter what you transition to in the late game, because that strong start can set you up for an easy top 4, top 5, top 6, and you'll get a lot fewer 7ths and 8ths. And then as the meta evolves and more content comes out, the statistics become more reliable, then you'll be able to figure out how to transition into optimal late game boards. And so in this video, I'm going to do a deep dive on Meta TFT's early data. They have stage 2, stage 3 data on what are the strongest units, what are the best items for those units, and what can they best transition into in stage 3 and 4. So before I get started on that, I wanted to first do a follow-up on my previous video where I shared some comments that people had around assuming I was like a bronze platinum player because my screen name is learning TFT. And then Shinzu mentioned that people put a negative emphasis on the word learning since it contains beginner connotations. And so I really want to shift people's perspectives on the word learning and beginner, because beginner mindset is how we get better. The best players at TFT, or frankly anything in life, are the ones that can approach whatever they're trying to do with a beginner's mindset. Because when you view yourself as an expert, that's when you stop learning. And that's especially in how quickly the world is evolving in today's environment with AI and technology. And the same is definitely true for TFT. TFT patches are every 2 weeks, and the patch sizes are getting much larger. If you think about 1419, 1418, how big these patches are, and the frequency of new set releases are increasing as well. So your ability to think like a beginner and to shift learning from a negative to a positive is really important for your ability to get better at TFT, as well as just generally for life. I want to also share a graph that I really like, that whenever you start approaching something, you usually believe that you know nothing, you're a beginner. Then there's this middle phase where you think you actually know a lot, and so you assume you're an expert. And that's actually the most dangerous place to be, because that's when you assume you know everything and you stop learning. And then once you actually truly become an expert at something, that's when you re-enter the beginner mindset of like, hey, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know a lot, which is why if you watch streams of a lot of top challenger players, they're like, oh, I'm shit at this game, or I suck. And then they'll also say like everybody else sucks. And that really to me indicates the whole beginner mindset, that if you assume you are an expert, you've already lost. Like you won't be able to compete with the top players because the top players always assume that there is more that they can learn. And so going back to this point is, if you really want to get better at TFT, or frankly anything in life, I would strongly suggest that you learn how to adopt a learning or beginner mentality. And I also want to share some quotes I really like about beginner's mindset. This is my like Rome database. I've in the past and currently I do a lot of reading, and I like to capture my notes. So you can see with TFT, I like to do a lot of research and data processing. But even just generally, I like to read a lot and collect ideas and kind of cross-reference them. So one of my favorite books on the beginner's mindset is by Shunryu Suzuki, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. He says, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. And another of couple of my favorite books are 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari. And a very key idea is that in the 21st century, is identifying that the rate of change of technology is accelerating. And you can see that in just how rapidly AI is changing like the landscape of work. And the most important of all, he says, will be the ability to deal with change, learn new things, and preserve your mental balance in unfamiliar situations. And that's partly why I love playing TFT, because it's almost like a metaphor for life, in that it's the environment's constantly changing. You're constantly thrown off balance. And the moment you think you know something, a new patch is thrown out, and then you have to start from scratch, which is can be extremely frustrating, but also extremely challenging and rewarding if you can figure out a process of learning and treating yourself as a beginner. Peter Drucker, he was a management consultant, trained a lot of executive leaders. Like I also do, in a previous life, I was a CEO of a mobile startup, and I've done a lot of executive coaching for startup founders. And this is a key idea by Peter Drucker. The only skill that will be important in the 21st century is the skill of learning new skills. Everything else will become obsolete over time. And again, he's referring to the fact that in the world that we live in today, so much stuff is changing, whether it's, just pure information, the tools that you're using, software, the way you interact with people, people's values. And then within TFT, units, augments, charms, whatever it is, like there's constant change. And so the most important skill that you can apply in TFT is how to learn. It's not even just what you learn, it's the process of learning how to learn. That is the most important skill that you can learn for TFT, and frankly, for life, if you want to be able to constantly stay ahead of the curve. So with that out of the way, I want to go into my 1419 early game analysis. This is done one day after the patch. Meta TFT does this on, let's see, they do this on Diamond Plus. You can see that here. And it was updated 6 hours ago. So this was probably a little bit more than 24 hours of data. And I have it sorted here by average placement, and I included the unit comps up to around 4.5. I didn't include the ones that have very low late game placements. It was just going to take up too much time, and I think this kind of captures the general purpose of what we're trying to do here, which is, again, winning rounds. Like we want to focus on winning rounds in stage 2, because that sets us up to have more HP. It provides more econ if you can win streak. And if you get into stage 4, let's say with 80 HP, plenty of gold, like you're already set up in a pretty good position to go top 4 or top 5, and you can figure out the late game later. So we're going to go through all of these, and then I'm going to break down a tier list at the 1 cost, and then 2 costs and 3 costs for stage 3. And keep in mind that these tier lists are not endgame tier lists. These are stage 2 and stage 3 tier lists, especially when you consider 3 costs. Like a lot of the 3 costs have really poor stats if you just look at aggregate stats, but that's because you don't want to finish the game with 3 costs. But certain 3 costs, if you're playing on, let's say, the portal that gives you 3 costs, or you get a 3 cost out of an orb, we'll talk about which 3 costs are particularly strong. So we'll get started with the stage 2 teams. And what I have here is listed in the parentheses is the number of units in this, what I'm calling like a pack of units. So you can see, like, once you get to stage 3, there are 6 packs, 5 packs. And then I have here the win rate. So WR stands for win rate. Average is the final average placement if you start with this pack. And then PR is play rate. So if it's like a 1 play rate, that means that in a single game, there's an average of 1 player playing this pack. And so you can see, like, for example, 0.7 means this is very common. Another 0.7 is very common, whereas 0.1 is going to be a lot less common. So usually the less common ones are going to be more conditional. They might require an emblem, for example. They might require specific items or an augment. And so we'll go into that as well. So to start, we're going to go into Lillia, Poppy, Zoe, Ahri. And maybe I'll just click in here. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'll put this on the right side. Oh no, you can't see it. Okay, we'll just go in here. So this is the first pack. It's very straightforward. You have your Lillia, Poppy, Zoe, and an Ahri for Scholar. You can actually replace Scholar with just like Bard. Ahri is actually less important than just giving Zoe Scholar. And if you have Scholar, then every auto attack increases the mana she generates, which is why attack speed is actually valuable on Zoe. Lillia can be your main tank. Poppy can hold melee bruiser items like BT, Sterex, and then Zoe is your AP carry in the backline. And then if you can get like Nico Jayce, then that would actually be better than Lillia Poppy, because Nico's just a stronger tank, unless you have Lillia 2-star. Also, if you go Nico Jayce, then you could easily at level 5 put in another portal to give you 3 portal with Zoe, Jayce, and another portal. Bard is usually better than Ahri, because then at level 5 you can throw in a Zillion. Hecarim would be stronger than Lillia, especially if it's Lillia 1, since you can get Arcana. You can always use Nunu as another Bastion, so this Poppy Zoe is the key for Witchcraft, and then you could throw in any other Bastion. So then at the bottom here, I have the transitions. So these are the percentage of the time that when you level up, you go to a 5-pack, level 5, you go to 6. This is the percentage of the time that this board will then transition into another board. So you can see here, for example, this board then transitions into adding Hecarim 26% of the time. And then from there, you can see that this can transition into Preserver, Karma, or Rise. So 18% of the time from this board, people go in to play a Preserver Rise board. So you can see here that from here, usually you'll put in like Rage Blade, Archangel. Shojin's usually not as good on a Preserver Rise board, though that Shojin could then later be put onto Milio, which is strong. But that's something, again, right now we're just going to focus, how do you build strong boards early? Because if you can preserve HP early, then you'll set yourself much better for the late game, particularly in the beginning of the patch where a lot of players are kind of dizzy or confused as to what to do. And so they're making a lot of optimal decisions. If you win the early game, you'll be in a much better position to at least preserve HP, if not climb. All right, so this board can also go into add Jayce and Galio. I put double Zoes here just to show more items. So basically what we talked about is like you can go into portal with Zoe. So anytime you can hold any of these portal units, then that would be good. You can throw in, instead of Nico, you can throw in, replace Poppy with Nico, and she can then hold the tank items. You could go into, what is this? 6 portal. If you have a portal emblem on 3/2, then you can transition this board into 6 portal. And then this win rate was too low, so I did not actually fill that out. All right, so that's the first pack, Lillia, Poppy, Zoe, Ahri. Next pack is Blitz, Nomsy, Twitch, Warwick. So this is 2 Hunter, 2 Vanguard. And Twitch can hold your AD. By default, he's an AD carry, but he can actually hold AP items as well. In a previous video on items, I talked about how blue buff can work on him, Shojin, Morello, and red buff actually work out really well because he does an AoE arrow that goes all the way through to the opposite side of the board. And so he can be an item holder for Jinx. If you have Rageblade, Last Whisper, he can be an item holder for Varus with Shojin IE. He can be an item holder for Rise. If you have Rageblade, red buff, he can be an item holder for Karma if you have blue buff, red buff. So this board is extremely flexible in what you transition to in the late game, particularly because you have the strongest 1-cost tank here, and you also have a really strong melee carry. So if you have melee bruiser items, then you can also throw them on Warwick. So this is from an item standpoint, probably the most flexible 4-pack that you can start with. And then as far as transitions go, we don't have that one. We do have this one. So this is just Warwick reroll if you happen to have Corrupt Vampiric Scepter. Anyway, this one here is Twitch, Warwick, Zillion, Hui, Swain. So this is a 5 frost board that you can transition into. This one is this was the Corrupt Vampiric Scepter one. Yeah, this one's 5 frost if you have a frost emblem. And then you can also go into Wukong Jinx reroll with this start as well. All right, so next we have Lillia, Poppy, Zoe, Cassiopeia. This is witchcraft emblem dependent because you get 4 witchcraft. You could at level 5 play this if you just throw in a Nico, but it's just going to be much stronger if you have a witchcraft emblem. Cassiopeia is best with attack speed items. The other reason that you wouldn't really want to play Nico here is Cassiopeia is an incanter, and she gains AP every time she attacks. So Rage Blade is her best item, but you would probably want like a incanter instead of Lillia on level 5 so that you can play 4 witchcraft to incanter. So this board is good with if you can do Cassiopeia reroll, but more likely is you're actually playing towards, with a witchcraft emblem, you're playing towards Rise or Karma as your carry. And Rise can actually hold Rage Blade really well. So Cassiopeia is a good item holder for Rise. And otherwise you could do blue buff. And either way you want like a Morello or red buff. But if you have tiers instead of like bows, you could put blue buff on Zoe and she could be an item holder for Karma. And then Poppy can also hold traditional tank items as well as melee carry items like BT Sterax, which would be good for transitioning later those items onto Fiora. So we'll take a look at what this transitions into. I don't have that one. Lillia, Poppy, Zoe. Yeah, this is just adding in Nico. This can transition into Zoe. This is the board we talked about earlier where you can have 3 portal and 2 bastion. So in this case, you'd be playing more around the Zoe. But that's the case where you don't have the witchcraft emblem. And then 10% of the time, this board actually transitions into Ziggs reroll, which is unlikely because you normally wouldn't be playing this board early unless you hit like a bunch of Blitz and Ziggs. So maybe you would consider playing this if you had a bunch of poppies and casts for some reason, but I would just ignore this one for the most part. All right. Next, we have Jayce, Poppy, Zoe, Kassadin. So this is a 3 portal with Poppy for 2 witchcraft here. And Zoe's your AP item holder. You could, if you hit an Ezreal, you could put Ezreal in instead of like Zoe, for example, and then slam AD items on Ezreal or Jayce. Ezreal can hold like Shojin, IE, like various items. And then 46% of the time, this transitions into the 6 portal board. If you have a portal emblem, it becomes much easier. If you don't have a portal emblem, then on level 6, you have to hit either Rise or Taric in order for you to be able to stabilize on 6 portal. Now we have Blitz, Poppy, Ziggs, and Nunu. So this is usually leading into Blitz reroll. Ziggs is your AP holder. if you hit kogmaw, then you can play kogmaw instead of ziggs with hunter, and blitz is your tank. So most of the time, this is blitz reroll, but ziggs, you can see here with blue buff, can be an item holder for karma late game. And then kogmaw, if you have like Shojin IE, can be a Varus holder. Or if you slam Rageblade, could be a Jinx holder or Rise Callista holder. So this is 33% of the time you'll go into Ziggs reroll. This is what the Ziggs reroll board looks like. And then 28% of the time it goes into 5 honey, which can then transition into Ziggs or kogmaw reroll. And we'll go into that later. All right, we have Elise, Nomsy, Twitch, Shyvana. And this board is a shapeshifter frontline instead of the Vanguard frontline we saw earlier, and with the hunters in the backline. So similarly, Twitch can be AD or AP holder, and then Shyvana can be a melee tank holder. So similar to Warwick from earlier, could hold BT and Styrax. Shyvana in this case can, although I think Shyvana is AP, so she doesn't benefit as much from the AD from Styrax, but it can still be quite good. And then I've included a bunch of shapeshifters here. These are all interchangeable with these two. These hunters can swap in for Nomsy or Twitch. And then if you get an early Wukong with a stone plate, that could just be a solo frontline instead. 37% of the time it transitions into basically adding another shapeshifter. Yeah, which isn't that great because you just play with 3 shapeshifter. And then 23% of the time you add, so this is just 2 shapeshifter, and I just put Twitch as extra items. So this isn't like a perfect synergy board. That's the other thing is many of the data that they include here are more like patterns. So for example, like this captures a bunch of different permutations, and they view this as kind of the core, but it's not like perfect synergies all the time. But this is like kind of the core where you can lead into stuff. So when you go down this route, this can lead into like a Jinx reroll. If you have a hunter emblem, you could play into 6 hunter. You could go into vertical frost from here if you get a frost emblem on 3/2, or you can go into Arcana Varus if you have like a IE Shojin on your Twitch. So that covers the stage 2 top average place and win rate packs. And based off of that, I put together a tier list on what are the best 1 costs to hold in stage 2. So you can see here that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 Poppy. So I have Poppy as like the top S tier. And then Zoe, Twitch, Jayce. Twitch is probably the most flexible. Zoe pairs really well with Poppy, and 3 Portal in the early game is very strong. Arguably, I could have put Blitz up here because Blitz is probably the best just pure tank in the early game. And actually, there's 2 Blitzes, so I would actually probably do that. So like, I'm going to modify that right now. Let's just do that. Okay. So I'm going to update this, and I'll provide the links to these in the description of the video. So we'll move blitzcrank up. Lillia is kind of just paired as a bastion here. Same thing with Warwick. Though Warwick with Twitch can give you easy access to 3 frosts if you throw in a Zillion or you hit an early Swain. And then Jayce with Zoe just gives you so many portal options, hitting Kassadin or Galio as a 2 cost. So these, I would say, are your clear S tier 1 costs in the early game. Again, you do not want to be playing these in like stage 4 unless you're playing some vertical direction. Like let's say you're playing 8 portal, then you can play these, or you're re-rolling blitz, and actually you're re-rolling blitz, Poppy, and Ziggs together. But this analysis, this tier analysis, is like a stage 2, what's strong and what will help you streak. Lillia and Warwick show up a bunch of times because they synergize well with the S tier. Nomsy pairs well with Twitch. Ziggs, if you're using it as a reroll or as an item holder for karma usually. And Elise is a cheap shapeshifter that pairs well with Jayce. These at the bottom, like Seraphine and Soraka were buffed, but Mage doesn't really have that much place in the meta. If you have the perfect setup, like you get Veigar, like learning to spell or something, or a pair of Veigars out of the box in a bunch of tiers, like maybe. I've seen Veigar, if you can hit Veigar 3, it's strong, but it's just getting there is really hard. And then with Action Jax, if you have a Chrono emblem, Jax is great. Multi-strikers can still be strong in the mid game, but it really narrows the direction that and from a pure like round win rate standpoint, it's not going to win that many fights in the early game usually. So these are definitely going to be your strongest S tiers. So now we're going to move to stage 3, which starts with Blitz, Nomsy, Twitch, Kogmaw, Rumble, Jinx. So this is a 4-hunter backline with a 2 Vanguard frontline, and Rumble and Jinx give you Sugarcraft. So Kogmaw here would be great as an item holder for Arcana Varus. So you can transition into Arcana Varus, or you could do reroll Kogmaw or Jinx. And you can throw in additional, if you happen to hit like a Galio 2 or Mordekaiser 2, then you can replace blitzcrank with those. If you don't have 4-hunter, you can throw in another Honeymancy or Nunu to get 3 honey if like let's say you hit an early Kogmaw 2. Or if you have an early Wukong 2 or just a Wukong 1 versus a Blitzcrank 1, Wukong 1 will hold Stoneplate better. And then 20% of the time from this board, they transition into Blitzcrank, Twitch, Kogmaw, Nunu, Rumble, Jinx, Olaf. So this is a 4-hunter with Blitzcrank, Nunu frontline. So this is a reroll Kogmaw, and hopefully you hit a 3-star Blitzcrank or Nunu or Rumble instead of Wukong. Otherwise, you can go into Varus, the Arcana Varus board, or the Wukong reroll board. I don't have that listed here. So the Wukong reroll board is just Wukong Preserver. All right. Now we have, this is the Warwick Corrupt Vampiric Scepter Warwick reroll board. Pretty straightforward. You just want to go vertical Vanguard, throw in Twitch and Olaf as hunters. We have Ziggs reroll, which we covered. This is a 5 fairy board. And this board primarily transitions into Callista in the late game. You have, and part of this from an itemization standpoint is flexible because you can, aside from Callista, which is where it goes the majority of, or the plurality of the time, you can actually also bring it into a 4 warrior preserver board. If you hit like, let's say Katarina early, Akali early, you have a Neela, or you hit a warrior emblem on 3-2, then you can go in a warrior direction, throw in some preservers. But this board is more so stable on 6 if you hit a fairy emblem, because otherwise you don't have 5 fairy. You could take out the Akali to put in another fairy. But it's just kind of hard to hit. And if you are playing, so usually you won't have this many items. If you are playing Rageblade with a Tristana 2, then you probably want to swap this out for a Rumble so that you can get Blaster. Or you can like have Ezreal or Hui, but usually you just want more frontline for your Rageblade to scale. If you are hitting Bruiser, like melee items, then you can start thinking about leaning towards a warrior direction. Or maybe even Hecarim reroll. So then you would need to start picking up your multi-strikers. Eventually, in the ideal case, you have Rageblade, you would eventually want to hold these units and lean towards 5 Fairy Callista later on. So that's the fairy board direction. You can see here that the win rate is lower. So this is not going to win that many rounds, which is not that bad because bow is heavily contested. So usually you want 2 Rage Blades on Callista. So losing rounds gives you carousel priority, but it has a higher average placement later in the game. And Callista is pretty underplayed right now. Like you can see this part here is like a low play rate. And there might be better ways. There probably are better ways to like get to Callista. But because Callista's low play rate, the 4.3 average is actually pretty good. Next, we have 6 portal. This is usually if you have a portal emblem, you want to angle at that point rise items on Zoe. You can put Nami items on Ezreal, or if you can also just move the rise items over to Ezreal if you hit it early as well. And this can transition to vertical portal, which is what happens 36% of the time, because this board is far less strong if you don't have this portal emblem on 6. And so if you don't have the portal emblem, then you can transition this into a Preserver Rise board, an Arcana Rise board, or Preserver Karma board. All right, we also talked about this. This is the Hunter Wukong board that leads into most likely either Jinx reroll, or if let's say you're carrying like Twitch with blue buff and like red buff, then you can move it into Preserver Karma and with a Wukong frontline. And Wukong can actually flex between Jinx reroll or Karma backline, since you usually play it with Preservers. And so if you have Preservers, then you have Zillion with Chrono, which pairs well with Karma. So this board, 17% of the time, actually majority or plurality of the time, will go into Karma Preservers. It can go into Rise Preservers. It can go into, this is the Wukong Karma Preserver board. And then this is the Jinx reroll board. And if you, I apologize for not building out all of these boards because this research is already taking me too much time. So if you want to figure out these boards, you can always just pause the video, put it into your team planner, and that'll actually help you learn the material better anyway. Lillia. So next board we have here is, this is actually the old ahri reroll board from like 2 or 3 patches ago. And this can transition into Preserver, Karma, or Rise. Zoe or ahri can hold your items. And then these are all like kind of the units that you might want to consider holding. Poppy and Hecarim can hold your melee bruiser items. If you're going Preserver Karma, then you can eventually move them onto Fiora, Gwen, or if you play the, Olaf Twitch variant instead of the Warriors, then your BT Sterax can go on to Olaf. So 18% of the time, this actually goes into Preserver Rise. Since you're already playing the Scholars and you have the Zoe, it's just a much simpler transition. And then 7% of the time, it goes into Karma Preservers. We have the 5 Honey board, which we talked about earlier. This, you can go into this from an early ziggs situation, and it can transition into ziggs reroll or kogmaw reroll. So kogmaw reroll is either with, you keep these 2 and kogmaw, you take out the ziggs Veigar, you throw in Twitch, Jinx, Olaf, and Rumble, and that gives you a strong front line. You probably roll on 6 since you want to 3-star like all your honeys, and in that case you're going for that board without Wukong. So that's if you're going Kogma reroll. If you're going Jinx reroll, you most likely play Wukong, unless you already hit like a ton of blitzcranks and nunu. All right, this is a Sugarcraft board, so it's really dependent on having a Sugarcraft emblem. You really don't want to be playing for Sugarcraft in the mid game, like it's not very strong. It does have a 52% win rate, but in general, it's like not that strong unless you have an emblem and are planning to play vertical Sugarcraft. This is probably also skewed by stats being in diamond. I suspect that if this was master, especially GM challenger level, like this win rate would be much lower. Yeah, like you would transition this into a 6 Sugarcraft board with preservers. Or you can go into, I don't know why you would necessarily go into this without a Sugarcraft emblem. You could also go into Jinx reroll. I suppose that putting more Sugarcraft in helps your Jinx scale more AD if you're going into Wukong reroll here, 12% of the time. So maybe that's a situation that you would do that, but I wouldn't, like the play rate on this is not that high, 0.3. So I don't think you really play this board that often unless you have emblem. Lastly, we have a 3 frost 2 shape board. This board can transition into Jinx reroll, 6 hunter if you have an emblem, vertical frost if you have an emblem, and Arcana Varus. So this is a very flexible board. Again, you can have Twitch hold for AD or AP. You have melee carries, you have tank. Flexible board. 19% of the time, this goes into Jinx reroll with Wukong. So 4 hunter Wukong reroll. 16% of the time, this goes into a shapeshifter frontline Jinx reroll because Jinx and Swain are both 3 costs. So that would only be the case if you hit like a ton of Swain, because you can see the win rate and average placement is much lower than the Wukong variant. So yeah, you would generally avoid this unless you're like you hit a very early Swain 2, for example. What is this? This is a vertical frost Varus board. So then Twitch is holding items for Varus. And then this is the Arcana Varus board. So given these stage 3 packs, we're going to talk about the stage 2 tiers. So Kogmaw appears the most times. Just a very good item holder. Can hold Shojin, Morello, which means that can also transition into Karma. Can hold Rageblade for Rise, Jinx. Can hold IE, Shojin for Varus. And then you can also reroll Kogmaw. So Kogmaw is extremely flexible, probably the best 2-cost carry in the game, in the mid game. This is probably why I've been tanking my LP in the last 2 days, because I've not been playing around Kogmaw. And now I've seen other challenger players playing Kogmaw, and now after doing the analysis, I will be holding Kogmaws very aggressively. Rumble, quite strong, played in a bunch of these, you have the Hunter variant can play Rumble. You have, well, that's Warwick. Portal can play Rumble with Ezreal. So this Sugarcraft can play Rumble with Jinx. So Rumble is very flexible. And then later you want Rumble for your Varus. So if you're playing Arcana Varus, you want Rumble. So Rumble's a very flexible unit. Galio, very strong because Vanguards, if we go back to the 1 cost, Blitz is strong. And then Zoe and Jayce were both S tier on the 1 cost. So if you have Zoe and Jayce, you just want another portal. So that's why the portals are up here. And Galio is better than Kassadin because it just gives you more frontline with the Rumble being a Vanguard, Blitz and Warwick being Vanguards. Like Vanguards are your premier frontline right now, aside from Bastion with the Poppy in the early game. And so Kassadin doesn't benefit from that as much, and you're not really playing around multi-strikers as much given this data. Although multi-strikers can be decently strong, you just need the right setup. Like, for example, if you get Unleash the Beast and an early Hecarim, that could be super strong. Zilean, good Frost being strong with Twitch Warwick. If you get like a Twitch Warwick, blitzcrank, and a Zillion early, that's extremely strong. So Zillion is strong as a trait bot early. His stun is very, just has a lot of utility. And then Zillion, you want to play Preserver's late game anyway. So a very strong unit. I might even argue that that's worth putting Zillion into S tier. Yeah, I think that would probably be pretty strong. And then Nunu, because Kogma's your S tier and Blitzcrank's an S tier, you get Blitz, Kogma, Nunu. You get more frontline and 3 honey in. Pretty strong. Nunu also pairs well with Poppy here with your Bastions. And then down here we have Shyvana. If you have like a Jayce, Zoe, portal setup, then you can throw in Shyvana. She has a lot of CC as well, so a lot of utility in the early game. Tristana is a blaster, so if you could play her with Rumble, she's also the best kind of early game lead-in probably to Callista, and can also hold items for Varus since you're already playing blasters. Ahri, because Zoe's strong, Ahri is just good as a trait bot for Zoe, and Ahri is also useful as a trait bot for the Arcana line down if you're playing towards Varus. And then down here, you just have units that aren't really played much in the C and D tier. And then finally, we have the stage 3 tier list. And again, I want to emphasize that this is not an end game like kind of situation or like a 3-star analysis. This is purely like stage 2, 1-star, 3-cost value. So like as a splash onto the board, or, just 1-star 3-cost, like a Nico with a stone plate versus a 2-star Poppy. Like if you have Shapeshifter on her, it's pretty close. And because if we go back here, Poppy, Zoe are so strong, and Jayce, if you can get Zoe, Jayce, Nico with another portal, that's an extremely strong start if you have like a stone plate. Swain, because Twitch Warwick is strong. If you can get that 3 frost in, maybe even an early 5 frost if you can get Hui and Zillion, or you have an emblem. Frost is one of the strongest openers, especially since Twitch is so flexible in the early game. And then Ezreal, again, because Portal is very strong. And Ezreal is arguably the best item holder for Varus. You throw a Shojin, i.e. red buff on him, and he'll do a lot of damage in the early game. Plus that 3 portal can deal a lot of damage. Next, we have Jinx Wukong. Because Kogma is so strong, Kogma can be an item holder for Jinx. A lot of times you might want to have like a 4 hunter setup. So that's particularly strong. You can go into Jinx reroll if you have the right like augments. Let's say you have a hunter emblem, you have hunting frenzy. Those can all be good. But even just a Jinx 1 early with a rage blade, if you have like a Wukong with a stone plate as well, can be quite strong. Wukong we have here primarily if you have like a stone plate early. Wukong 1 out of the box can be very strong. Bard can pair with your Zoe, and then Bard is good late game because you have so many preserver options with Karma and Rise that he can be valuable early game and transition well into the late game. Hecarim out of the box, Hecarim can pair well with Poppy, and if you have like BT Sterak's, he can be very strong in the early game. The only thing is because you really want to prioritize holding these units, I would not prioritize holding Jax and Ashe that much unless you are like you have sword cloak, sword belt, and you get Hecarim out of the box. Then obviously you could prioritize holding the multi-strikers, but you really want to have multi-strikers with Hecarim. But later in the game, Hecarim down the Arcana path with Varus is strong, so he scales well into the late game as well. Katarina with Warrior reroll, if you have a Warrior emblem, is very strong. If you get a 3 fairy setup early game with like a BT and you throw the Queen's crown on her, she could get those stacks really fast with her spin because every time she throws out one of her attacks, it adds a stack. So Katarina could, and she also wounds and anti-heal, I believe. So she can be quite strong as a 1-star early game, but you're not playing around fairy and warrior that often, like the 1-costs. You're not holding, like you're playing maybe a Lillia, but you're not really holding any other fairies or warriors, and the warriors in the 2-costs are not that great. So I'd say Katarina is a strong unit, but this is more of a situational type of play. Hui, you could argue that Hui could be A tier just because Frost is so strong. But if you are playing Warwick Twitch, and let's say you have a 2-star Twitch who's your primary carry, you don't really want to have more backline. You just want more frontline. So like a Swain would be better than a Hui. You just wanted your Twitch to deal more damage so that you can get those Frost soldiers up. If you happen to have like a Shojin Morello or something, you can still play Hui out of the box, and he could be quite good with blasters, and that could still lead you to Varus. Shen, early game, does have stun. Nico also has CC, so could be quite good, but just the synergy, like that Pyro early game, is kind of wasted since you're not really playing around Akali much. So Shen is a unit that you would add in later in the Arcana Varus build, but it's just not that strong in the early game. And then these are just not that strong early game. Even if you are playing Veigar, like he's not going to get strong until you hit like Veigar 2, very strong frontline. You have good items, and you're really scaling him by buying charms. So for this analysis, we're talking about what's strong in the early so that you can streak stage 2 and stage 3. These are not going to be that strong. An early Mordekaiser could be good if you have like a Crown Guard, just like as a standalone unit. Purely from a like synergy standpoint, Eldritch is not being played much. You're not really playing Neela, Syndra. Ashe, Elise are more like trait bots. I mean, you could do reroll Ashe and Jax, but even in that situation, you're not playing Mordekaiser. So you would maybe use Mordekaiser as like a pair with Blitzcrank to just add more Vanguards. But yeah, that's not that strong. So given this analysis, my biggest takeaway from this that I was not playing around was actually Kogmaw. And I was already playing around Zoe. Poppy is very strong. I have not been slamming enough melee bruiser items on Poppy as an item holder for the Karma Preserver line for Fiora and Olaf. So I will be doing more of that. Twitch is just like the most flexible backline carry in the early game. And because of that, playing around like Frost and Hunter, I have not been playing around that much. And then also Twitch leads very naturally to Kogmaw. So my biggest takeaways from this is I got to be playing more Kogmaw, more Hunters, and then that naturally leads more to playing Varus. And I have not been playing too much Varus as well. So that is my early game analysis. If you found this video helpful, please let me know in the comments. If you have thoughts, feedback, ideas to add on to my analysis that maybe I didn't consider, I would love if you could share your thoughts and treat our comment section to this video as like kind of a discussion group where we can all learn together. So yeah, I want to thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.